Yeah, so we kind of touched on this earlier, but one genius thing that the Pokemon Company or Game Freak came up with was to split up their releases into two games at first, and then eventually make a third. So, for example, in their original release of the first generation, they released, I think, Red and Green in Japan, and then in America they released Red and Blue. But later on they released Yellow, which featured Pikachu, which was their most popular Pokemon. They had realized at that point. In Red and Blue, you could start with any of three Pokemon that you chose, but in Yellow, you would always start with Pikachu. And that was a major selling point for them, wanting to push that popular Pokemon. But the idea was that you could restrict certain Pokemon that you couldn't get in Blue or you couldn't get in Red, and then make them available to people when they traded with each other, and you know that kind of fostered a community.
So this was probably a smart marketing idea since there was only some Pokemon available in Red and some in Blue. So as kids in a clique, they would someone only get the Red and get the Blue, and this would prosper trading between friends to get certain Pokemon that they want, and if someone else wanted a different Pokemon, they can trade between each other.
Yeah, and I can imagine that a lot of friends would try to get each other to get the game they didn't have, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so they would often make like a third game that just added new features. Like I remember in Yellow, Pikachu actually followed you around in the world. So that was an interesting little tidbit they added. Crystal, like we said before, they had moving sprites.
Yeah, and I think Crystal had all the. Uh, we'll get into this later about the legendary Pokemon, but they had
Oh yeah,
legendary
right.
Pokemon that were in the Gold and Silver, and also new ones that were only in Crystal.
Right. So let's talk about the gameplay and mechanics. So there's always there's moving goals in Pokemon, really. In every game, the overall goal, like the very end goal, which isn't even the end goal still because there's player versus player combat that you can do, but the idea at the very beginning of the game, your professor tells you, go catch every single Pokemon in the entire world.
Which was their catchphrase.
Yeah, gotta catch them all is we all remember that as kids, and every new generation had even more Pokemon, making it even harder. And so the pursuit was to get every Pokemon, which was again impossible unless you had a friend.
Yeah.
And but along the way, there's a storyline which you complete before you get all the Pokemon. And what you would hope to do is to defeat the champion of the Elite Four.
Now, to get to the Elite Four, you have to be the 8 gym leaders that were city level bosses, and to get to the cities, there were different kinds of routes you can take. You can walk through the forest, or sometimes I would think maybe halfway or a quarter way in the game, you would get a bicycle, which will make it faster. And then there's some Pokemon that can fly to cities, and then there's water types that you can use to ride on through the oceans. But in all, they have the same goal to get to.
Yeah. On the right, you can see one of the most recent Pokemon League iterations in which you fight the Elite Four. So every game has this kind of a villainous team. Most people who played Pokemon remember Team Rocket, which is the first villainous team, led by the infamous Giovanni. Every generation after that had its own team, except with the exception of Gen 2, which still had Team Rocket.
Had Team Rocket.
Yeah. The image that you see on the right is the 3 legendary Pokemon, the most well-known legendary Pokemon of Gen 3, Sapphire, Ruby, and Emerald. And again, another thing that they marketed on was the idea that you could not get the red one if you got the blue game.
One. And then you can't get the blue one if you got the red game.
Yeah, but then when they released Emerald, you could get all 3. So the gameplay kind of changes whether you're getting one of the games or the other one.